Amy Diehl is a gender equity expert and co-author of Glass Walls Shattering the 6 Gender Biases Barriers Still Holding Women Back at Work. Amy, thank you so much for being with us. It's really hard to believe that it's actually
Thank you for
been,
having me.
of course, it's really hard to believe that it's been about 10 years since the Me Too movement started in 2017. And back then, obviously, we saw a number of resignations of a lot of very high profile, very prominent men. That's happening this time around, albeit at a much slower pace. Talk to us about the differences in terms of accountability between the Me Too movement a decade ago and what we're seeing now in the fallout of the Jeffrey Epstein files. Because one of the key differences is that back then, politics didn't really play a role. There wasn't necessarily a sort of partisan nature to the level of accountability or the resignations, etc. That's playing a much bigger role this time around. Give us your take on the two movements, if you will.
Well, I think that there are certainly, in the United States government, the person at the very top of our government, our president, is, in those files. And so there is, political pressure to not, as you've seen, political pressure to not release the files. And now that they are released, we're not even sure that everything has been released. So you are seeing a much more of silencing of victims and trying to keep this at bay.
And just in terms of the way that these files have been released, I mean, I've talked a lot about on the show, just really about the way the sort of the names of the powerful men and the co-conspirators, their names have been redacted, while you often see the names of victims being released. And either it's sort of carelessness or there's a deliberate intent behind this. I mean, that's for other people to sort of speculate on. But just in terms of what that says about the power dynamics and really what that says about credibility and just trusting the process. Obviously, it is very difficult for young women who have been sexually abused to come forward in the first place, let alone this idea that their names are now going to be exposed. That we've talked a lot about how that re-traumatizes the victims. Give us your take on that.
Yeah, absolutely. It absolutely re-victimizes victims when their names are released without their consent. It re-traumatizes, like the whole process re-traumatizes victims, and it really shouldn't. We should have processes in place where victims are believed, supported, and they can see that their abusers are brought to justice. However, we are not seeing that so far in this case. If you think about it, in the United States, we've had 2 convictions related to this case so far. Jeffrey Epstein himself and Ghislaine Maxwell. And that's been it. So I think what we really need to see from this case is that the individuals who have perpetuated the abuse or who have enabled it are brought to justice.
Just in terms of what you've read with, some of these emails that have been released and what you've seen from that front, what is your sort of overarching perspective and view about especially among the elite and powerful men in this country? What is your overarching view of misogyny, gender and power, and what we're seeing in terms of the main themes of some of these emails?
Yeah, so the emails were really interesting because what you're seeing is how casual they are with their misogyny and their everyday correspondence. It's very explicit. They thought it was behind closed doors. It's very explicit misogyny. So Epstein, he was well connected to scientists at top universities who actually continue to associate with him even after a 2008 conviction for soliciting prostitution with a minor. But the files show how he used his power and money and status in ways that kept women out of places where they might succeed. So he had these networks, right? These exclusive networks of men, and the men in the club benefited. Epstein donated millions of dollars to these scientists. He donated millions of dollars to their research. He hosted them at networking dinners at his home. He invited them to his island and to his ranch in Santa Fe, and he connected them to potential funders of their work. But what you also see in these files is that they did not see, Epstein and his associates did not see women as their intellectual equals. There was an AI researcher who said it's hard to be brilliant if you are worrying if you look fat or why another woman hates you. Epstein responded, there are no really smart women, none. And then another point with Epstein called women all weak and a distraction. And what he was referring to, he was complaining because two women were invited to an exclusive retreat that was organized by a literary agent. Epstein felt that no women should be invited. And so if you think about it, Epstein really had two types of victims. He had the direct victims who were sexually exploited, but he also had indirect indirect victims. And those are the women who were excluded and kept out of intellectual conversations, who were degraded in the casual conversations, and whose ideas were taken seriously and, were unable to benefit from, the money that the men were able to benefit, the money and the funding that the men were able to benefit from.
All right, Amy Diehl, we appreciate your perspective. Thank you. Thank you so much.